Welcome to the Nonprofits, and tonight we're going to talk about a politician and how he wants to go back. When I say back, I mean backwards. But Rob is going to fill us in on this. Rob, what do you got for us?
Yeah, holy wow. Imagine being a lawmaker and trying to push a law that 69% of all Americans do not want. This seems futile for your own efforts. Josh Schriver wants to outlaw same-sex marriage in Michigan. He clearly knows who he's going for because he claims to be Michigan's most conservative state representative, which is fair, I suppose. You can pick a camp, but he also always adds, "I'm a white rapper." I don't know why he keeps adding that. It is irrelevant to his point, and it only seems to score points, but he's really proud that he's a white rapper. This story is from Raw Story by David Badash, The New Civil Rights Movement on December 3rd, 2024.
Thanks, Rob. And I can only imagine this guy rapping. Well, actually, I can't because I actually know what that sounds like now. But having said that, Rob, how did the staff react to this tweet? I mean, as you mentioned, this is something that's not even popular on what we would consider traditionally his side of the aisle. So what did they do?
Yeah, so he's apparently gotten into a couple different controversies. And then after this came out, most of his staffers and the people that work with him, most of them resigned, just straight up and out. And when we say 69% of Americans, we don't even mean 69% of Michiganders, my home state. It is all Americans do not want to ban same sex. And then when he came out and said this, there was then more tweets about persecution. And then because he also tweeted a racist conspiracy theory, he said, "Ooh, now I'm being called a racist," which is, yes, if you do that, you get called that. So it's just more of the same. And I am pleased to know that at least some people that were working with and for him had the decency to resign immediately after.
I have to admit, I was a little surprised that they resigned, considering that there is a segment in the United States, obviously that not that 69%, but there is a group that's like red meat to them. I think he just overestimated the support that he expected to get from that. But Cindy, what do you think motivates politicians to spread information like this when they're defending really a rather indefensible stance? What do you think their purpose? Why do you think he's doing this?
It's completely alien to me because, first of all, if you have to lie constantly to defend your position, then your position is wrong by definition. And every single quote from Schriver in this article is a lie, every single one. But yeah, he's the symbol of a political party that became about nothing else but hate, grievance, and performance. But one of the reasons I think he keeps talking about this is he's part of a political party that is, as I said, performative, and taking an extreme stance is in itself performative. And so the problem is that it has consequences. Like when Trump got elected in 2016, I spent hours explaining to people around me in France why it was such a bad thing, because they didn't take him seriously at the time. And my main argument was that his vileness was going to incite other people like him to be more vocal, more apologetic about their grievances and bigotry. And that's exactly what happened. We had, the US had racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic insults and aggressions that skyrocketed after his election. And now he's just got reelected on the same platform, so it's going to be 1,000 times worse. But to me, it's even worse when you think about it in terms of rights. It's one thing to oppose a right that is being discussed to be given to someone else. Like the UK right now is discussing a law to provide access to dying with dignity. So you can have people who are against it and during this period, and that's fine. But it's something else entirely to stay on purpose unapologetically after it's been in place for over a decade. The cynicism at play here, to me, is staggering. The moral and social and class superiority that he must feel in order to say, okay, I'm going to take this right away from you, and for no reason, just because I don't like it. That's just, to me, is really scary. This entitlement and this sense of superiority. It's really scary.
For me, I agree with you on the aspect that it's one thing, and I know that you and I, from many other conversations, you mentioned the death with dignity. We're on the same page there. But I understand what you're saying, that it's one thing for people to debate and discuss in an open forum what their pros and cons for something that we're talking about, whether we're going to allow this to happen. But now we're over 10 years past this, and we shouldn't be needing to have this conversation again. So, and I look at it that my oldest child will be impacted because they would fall under this category. And that makes no sense to take people who have families and relationships and say, oh, just kidding. We said you had this right, but we don't. So switching to you, AJ, how do you think, and I'm going to word this carefully because you and I have talked about this before. How do you think the personal religious beliefs that people go to church on Sunday, because a lot of this is what this boils down to. This guy is promoting a religious belief about what he thinks about LGBTQ people. How do you think that, whether it's religious or something else, should influence a politician or an employee who provides a service in the public? How should they be able to carry that over into their professional lives on Monday morning?
So absolutely not. Like, these personal beliefs are things that you practice in private at home. But unfortunately, Josh Schriver isn't going to stop at wanting to make gay marriage illegal again. He wants to impose all of his personal beliefs onto the public, onto the people that he serves in Michigan. Another one of the things that he mentions is that he wants to refuse gender-affirming care for transgender people, whether there are minors or adults, consenting adults. He thinks that, for example, not allowing the conscience exception for DMV employees to discriminate against trans people in Michigan is going to lead to more Christian persecution. By the way, the conscience clause allows an employee, like a public employee, to refuse service based on their personal beliefs. For example, a doctor in a publicly funded clinic may refuse to perform an abortion if it goes against their personal dogma or whatever they may believe in. I don't know. I mean, speaking of reproductive rights, like, he also wants to refuse birth control to women. He said that if doctors are sworn to do no harm, then lawmakers should look into banning hormonal birth control, implying that preventing a pregnancy is harming a baby, which is, a very commonly Hegelian unscientific conservative belief. So, I mean, to put it simply, no, like, none of these personal beliefs should come into his office on Monday.
I think that we're seeing some of the side effects, and Cindy had talked about this for about a previous situation, where we're seeing people emboldened by rhetoric they've heard previously to think that I can say even more intolerable things and push for even more unacceptable things, because it isn't just gay marriage that they're concerned of, marriage equality. It's they want to roll back, as you mentioned, body autonomy for a whole host of issues. But Rob, how do you think we should respond to politicians who use, because we mentioned the persecution if they don't get to discriminate, which really means privilege that they're losing. What do you think? How should we respond to politicians who use fear and hatred against marginalized groups? Really, what it sounds like is a popularity play. What do you think about that? What is our responsibility?
I think it's society's responsibility for education and fact checking, and that this is really a preventative thing. Once it gets to this point, it's going to be mostly messed up and screwed. Because I don't even want to push back on what you just said, AJ. Just I agree that their religious beliefs should not come into the government, and yet that is impossible. It is simply impossible because people have religious beliefs that inform their worldview and also inform their moral system and what they believe is right and wrong. So while it would be really nice that we could literally compartmentalize these things, it would be wrong to ask a person to act morally when that moral action is against what they believe to be moral. The problem is that their morals are wrong, and it is impossible to expect a person to come into power and then go, I'm just now going to forget everything I know. And the only way to deal with this is to have it never have gotten to this place in the first place. So when these things do happen, I mean, I suppose we can demonize them and say, haha, look at the strange man who has strange beliefs. That's useful sometimes. Public shaming is actually a very strong motivator. But because they're a persecution complex, that's also a strong motivator for their base. So what should we do? We should never have let it gotten here in the first place, and it can only really be done with strong morals and preventative care, which is actually just educating everybody from the outset. That's the best I got.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with what you just said, though. Like, yeah, that the problem isn't like the beliefs that are taken in. It's just like, how did they get there in the first place? And how do you get them to not go there anymore? Yeah, I'm with you.
So, Cindy?
Yeah, on the topic of compartmentalization, someone I knew he used to work in radio dating, rocks and fossils and things like that, and he was working with with a younger creationist. So it seems to be a little bit impossible, but actually the guy managed to compartmentalize the two things completely. Like during the day, he was dating rocks and fossils, and he said, yeah, they're like 200,000 years old, and then went home and taught his kid that the Earth was 6,000 years old. So it's possible to have those extreme views and still manage to avoid cognitive dissonance. I also, I live in Belgium, and not many people are religious. I discovered recently that I had a few ones in my soccer team, and it doesn't influence their view because they're not taught that their religion is the source of morality. So religion is more like, I don't know, cultural thing more than really a very strong belief in an entity, although that exists too, but it's not as important. So I think it's still possible to have religious beliefs and not have them influence your view of the world. But that means the religious belief itself has to be taught in a very specific way in order to avoid what we see in the US or any Muslim country or any very, very Catholic country like Nigeria or some South American countries. So yeah, it's a complicated topic, and we should avoid hasty generalizations.
AJ, you had mentioned limiting reproductive rights. And this concept of going backwards, because that's precisely what he's doing. He's saying, not just let's slow things down, but let's do a 180 in full speed, the opposite direction. What do you think the long-term consequences of this type of action, of people throwing this type of rhetoric out there? What do you think this has to do and could impact the legal landscape and societal norms?
I think, there's a lot at stake because in the case of Schriver, as if trying to, take things back in time by trying to make the LGBTQ community disappear, dominating women's bodies or trying to take away body autonomy wasn't enough. He also has voted against certain bills that will prevent racial discriminations, or he's posted racist conspiracy theories in his professional social media, not just his private personal page. And according to Josh, just like there is this anti-Christian agenda, there's also an anti-white agenda. He said that there is a racist plan to replace whites with non-whites through illegal immigration to irreversibly warp America's demographics, voting citizens, and national identity to keep power in the hands of the godless regime. Excuse me, sir, but is that not what the conservative white Christian nationalists have been doing, like, to people for generations, to like people of color, minorities? To me, like, his set of beliefs are just generally toxic, and that is what we often discuss regarding people that make decisions for entire populations based on their individual personal belief. Like Rob mentioned earlier, you can't take away people's religious beliefs from who they are, from how they see the world, and they can often not separate that. But in the case of a representative, this is somebody that is meant to represent entire populations. Like, he's supposed to say, okay, I'm going to put myself aside and represent these people and listen to what these people want. And again, Rob says 69% of Americans or Michiganders do not want to do away with gay marriage. So listen to that, right? Like, he should be listening to that rather than be listening to his own personal wishes and desires and dogma. So to me, like, I don't know, it's just that the bullshit that he's spewing just shows me why it's a problem to let his personal beliefs seep into the decision making that he's supposed to be making for people.
I want to jump in and say I think the fact that the word representative was used is perfect, because he is a representative and he should represent. Clearly, I'm an atheist, and when I first watched the movie First Contact, and they were trying to figure out which person to go be the ambassador for the human race with aliens, and then the lead character is like, I should go, and then one of like the generals is like, 89% of all of the population of the planet believes in some kind of god. Why do you think you should go? And even as an atheist, it's like, oh shit, that's a compelling point. He should be representative.
Yeah, this great replacement theory that AJ was talking about, this idea that whites are slowly replaced. So it originated from a French guy. Sorry about that. And to me, it's one of the most stupid and hypocritical argument, because what they're saying is that non-white people have more kids than white people, and therefore we need to do something about it. And the obvious response is, well, why don't white make more kids? Why don't you make more kids? And usually, and especially in Europe, those people only have 1 or 2 kids. And so when you start going into this discussion, is why don't you make more kids? Why should I? Well, you want white people to be more represented, so make more kids. And they don't see the stupidity of their position, because they see a problem, they have the solution, but they don't want to implement it. And that to me is just stupid, because as soon as you try to answer that question, why don't you want more kids, then you start talking about the systemic issues of the society, like the cost of living, like the cost of healthcare in the US, like all this, and all those problems they don't want to acknowledge, because they don't want to solve them, because they hit mostly the other people compared to them. So yeah, this I don't understand how this argument, this position that this great replacement theory is so popular in right wing media and right wing people, because it's stupid to me.
Well, you have to understand, and this is something I was going to say when AJ first brought this up, before I was rude, is that this is something that we talked about over 30 years ago in very extreme right wing, like White Aaron Resistance and other people who I was involved with at the time. This was something that was commonplace then, but they wouldn't say that in public. And that's what unsettles me, is that now I'm seeing elected officials propagating something that open racists used to say behind closed doors. And that is very concerning. But one quick thing I wanted to run through, because I know where I want a quick answer on this, because this is just what you view about it, because we're getting close to the end of this. We've talked enough about these kind of people. Rob, do you think this is a performance, as we mentioned before, performative politics, or do you think this guy really believes some of these things that he's saying?
It's not mutually exclusive, and I'm sure that it's actually both. For the existence of all politics, the person who wins is the person who's most popular, or I guess is the person who kills everybody else and takes the monarchy, and then nobody else decides to kill them back. But generally, if you're the most popular, you're going to win, and that requires spectacle. It just does. That's how, like, even a lot of the ancient Roman stuff, and why they'd have large parades about their conquest and things like that, and they would give gifts to the commoners. So of course it's a theater, of course it's performance. He knows the people he's trying to get, and he's not afraid about alienating the ones he doesn't. That doesn't mean that he's going to then have a majority, but the majority doesn't matter as long as there's enough people around that are similar enough to him. So he's trying to make himself deeply popular with the people that he wants, and he's doing it through performance. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of popular, speaking of performance, if you want to watch the nonprofits and damn right popular, but not a performance, click down below.